Justinian had a dream that was as expensive as it was ambitious, the total restoration of the Roman Empire. He had begun his reign with a flurry of reforms and a distant, glittering victory in Yemen. To the citizens of Constantinople, it seemed the glory of the Caesars was finally returning. But Justinian was about to learn a lesson that has undone every great empire in history. You cannot rebuild the past if you cannot pay for the present. While Justinian looked west toward the lost provinces of Italy and Africa, a shadow loomed in the east. For centuries, the Sassanid Persians had been Rome's shadow self, a rival superpower that had humbled emperors and decimated legions. By the early 6th century, the Persian king, Kavad, ruled an empire on the brink of instability. As Persian client kings began defecting to the Roman side, the eternal rivalry reached a boiling point. Before Justinian could ever hope to reclaim Rome, he would first have to survive a brutal baptism of fire on the Persian frontier. It was a war that would introduce the world to the legendary General Belisarius, but it would also force Justinian to make a choice that would haunt his treasury for decades. He wanted an empire. But the Persians were about to show him the bill. This is the story of the first real test of the sole emperor, and the lesson he had to learn the hard way. A constant source of friction was the Caspian Gates, one of the few strategic passes through the Caucasus Mountains. Originally Roman-controlled, it had fallen into Persian hands, but the cost of guarding the pass was bankrupting the Persian treasury. They demanded Rome pay for its defense. Rome refused. Desperate to stabilize his legacy, Kavad sent a startling proposal to the Roman emperor. He wanted them to formally adopt his favorite son, Khosrau, to ensure he would inherit the Persian throne without a civil war. Justinian was interested. Peace was cheaper than war, but his legal advisors warned him of a hidden trap. If Khosrau became a Roman son, he could technically claim the Roman throne too. The Romans sent a vague, evasive reply. The two sides met near the border city of Nisibis. Khosrau arrived in person, expecting a royal escort to Constantinople for his adoption. Instead, he found a tense, hostile delegation. The Persians taunted the Romans over past victories. The Romans insulted the Persians by declaring that an adoption could only happen through force of arms, not law. The negotiations shattered. Khosrau returned to his father, vowing vengeance. War was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty. The early years of the war were a mess of indecisive raids and skirmishes. Desperate for results, Justinian reached into his own household and selected a young officer named Belisarius. Belisarius quickly proved he was different. He was transferred to the premier eastern fortress of Dara. It was here he met the historian Procopius, the man who would document the rise of the age's greatest general. The war didn't start well for the new emperor. A senior commander bungled an invasion near the border, leading to a panicked Roman retreat. Justinian acted fast. He fired the failure and promoted Belisarius to lead the defense. Belisarius's first mission was to build a new fort to stabilize the line, but the Persians saw the construction as a provocation and moved to destroy it. Roman reinforcements arrived too late. The Persians crushed them and forced the survivors back behind the walls of Dara. Following this disaster, Justinian doubled down. He named Belisarius his supreme commander in the east and authorized him to raise a massive army. The climax came when a large Persian force marched on Dara. Their commander sent Belisarius a taunting message: "Prepare a bath for my arrival, for I will be sleeping in your city tonight." Belisarius met them outside the walls with 25,000 men. He was outnumbered nearly 2-1, but he had a plan. He dug a massive series of trenches to funnel the Persian cavalry and hid his best troops for an ambush. When the sun rose, the wind turned, blowing the Persian arrows back into their own ranks. Belisarius's counterattacks were surgical, shattering both Persian wings. When the dust settled, over 5,000 Persians lay dead. It was a stunning Roman victory, and Belisarius was not yet 30 years old. But in war, one victory is rarely enough. The Persians changed tactics, avoiding big battles and launching a lightning raid toward the city of Antioch. Belisarius tracked them, but he was cautious, wanting to let them retreat without a fight. His own troops mocked him for his restraint. Yielding to the pressure of his subordinates, Belisarius engaged the Persians on Easter Eve. Despite having more men, the Romans were routed. Belisarius's greatest weakness was exposed. He could defeat an enemy army, but he couldn't always control his own officers. Justinian, frustrated by the lack of progress, recalled his general to the capital. In late 531, the old Persian king Kavad died, and Khosrow finally took the throne. Still shaky in his power, Khosrow wanted peace, but he wanted it on his terms. Justinian, eyeing his true dream of reconquering Italy, was desperate to close the Eastern Front. He accepted a treaty ironically named the Eternal Peace. The cost was staggering. Rome had to pay 110 centenaries of gold, a literal mountain of wealth. They also had to surrender strategic forts and move their military headquarters away from the border. Rome had won the war on the battlefield, but they had lost the peace in the treasury. By the year 532, Justinian could look at his empire with a sense of guarded pride. He had rewritten the ancient laws of Rome, survived a brutal baptism of fire against the Persian superpower, and secured his borders from the Caucasus to the Balkans. To the outside world, the Roman sun was rising again. But behind the gilded gates of the great palace, the foundation was cracking. Justinian's lesson on the Persian frontier had come with a literal mountain of gold, wealth stripped from the pockets of his subjects through aggressive, unrelenting taxation. He had purchased a peace he couldn't afford to fuel a dream he hadn't yet realized. While the frontier was finally quiet, the heart of the empire was screaming. The people of Constantinople didn't see a restorer of Rome. They saw a cold, sleepless autocrat and his corrupt officials who were taxing them into poverty. The only outlet for this growing rage was the hippodrome. In the chariot races, the city's rival factions, the Blues and the Greens, found a place to vent their frustrations. Usually, these factions fought each other, but the emperor's heavy-handed policies were doing the impossible. They were uniting his enemies. Even as his loyal general Mundus secured the western frontiers, a much more dangerous front was opening up within the city walls. Justinian had survived the Persian king, but he was about to face a far more terrifying opponent: his own people.